Well, we are back again for another session of Tuesday's Thought. Tonight's subject matter is stressed to impress. Welcome. Before we dig into our topic tonight, I'm going to challenge you to go ahead and share this link, subscribe, like, all of those good things. Make sure you're commenting tonight. No doubt we have all heard the expression, dressed to impress. Well, tonight, we are going to be shining the light on what's usually really going on behind the scenes. And that's the stressing behind the dressing. Okay, so let me give this disclaimer. Our thought tonight has absolutely nothing to do with physically dressing or fashion, etc., anything like that. It's really just a play on words, right? As we're gonna dig deeper into really what I consider to be a legitimate rat trap. It's a phenomenon that some of us have spent a good chunk of our lives getting stuck into, quite frankly. We're going to be talking about the tendency to keep doing things, to go above and beyond our means to make a statement or to leave an impression. Okay, now for some people, this is not just a tendency. For some people, this unfortunately is a lifestyle. And so we're going to talk about it. We need to talk. Okay, so what are we doing and why are we doing it? Now, how many times, consider this, how many times have you found yourself stressing out to either acquire something or to be something, to go somewhere, right? Just for the sake of making an impression. So whether that's purchasing certain items of, brand fashions, it could be driving a certain type of automobile or, souping up the car to look some type of a way. It could be having certain types of social connections as well, or living in certain neighborhoods, or, for some people, it's not even tangible things like that, but it could be intangibles, like using certain types of vocabulary, speaking in a certain way, right? So the objective, or the object rather, of our impression, so in other words, the people that we're trying to impress, that can be anyone. Usually it's others in our circle, right? But believe it or not, it can even be our very own selves. We may not realize it, but we can become caught up in impressing ourselves. In other words, we can be driven by an internal pressure to outdo ourselves. And that internal pressure that fuels that drive to outdo yourself or to prove yourself can really be a silent killer if we're not careful. Okay, now let me pause for a second. Let me pause right here. When I speak about having a constant desire to outdo yourself from like previous levels or previous goals, for example, I'm not talking about that genuine result that comes based on a good work ethic and a recognition that as an individual, God really desires and intends for us to grow and to develop, right, as we're fulfilling our purpose. I'm not talking about that because that's healthy. I'm simply talking about that trap, right? And I'm calling it a trap intentionally. It's a trap, saints. It's a trap, folks. It's a trap that ties us, right, to wanting to stand out or to excel or keep up an image as compared and measured by somebody else's standard. And the key word there is image, okay? Let me pause again. This notion of self-image, it really does come wrapped in various packages, okay? So often when we think about self-image, we kind of think about, the physical appearance or a certain look that's projecting or your status in society. But I'm not just referring to that, right? You can also be trying to create an image of yourself that is tied to your spirituality, for example, or to your intellect, for instance, right? You're projecting how deep and wonderful and how spiritual you are, and that's sort of the image that you're putting out of yourself, and you're trying to outdo yourself. You pray 15 times for the day, and that's all wonderful. That's great. But I simply wanted to highlight that when we talk about an image, a certain self-image that we're trying to project, it's not just necessarily in the physical features or how we present ourselves physically in our look. So every one of us, everyone, typically wants to make a good first impression, right? And not only a good first impression, but a good ongoing impression, okay, usually. And that's perfectly normal, right? But the effort to impress those around you becomes dangerous when you are succumbing to the internal pressure to keep up appearances based on what you see around you. I'm gonna say that again. That effort that you have, that you make to impress those around you becomes problematic. It becomes dangerous when you're succumbing to an internal pressure to keep up appearances based on what you see in your environment. Now, let's not get it twisted. Please don't get it twisted. Keeping up appearances is equally damaging, especially now in this purely social media driven era that we're living in, right? When we're completely bombarded and just saturated with images of everyone else's success, of their achievements, of the things that they're acquiring. And so we tend to model and to mimic or pattern our pursuits after what we've absorbed from that environment. It seems like it's commonplace, right? If you go scrolling through pretty much any social media platform, most of the things that you see celebrated on a person's timeline are things, oh, I just got this new this, or oh, I just went to this place. And that's all fine and good, but I highlight that there's an overemphasis. You're saturated. You cannot go through a day without scrolling through your social media feeds without seeing something of that nature. Okay, so why are we doing this? Why this tendency to want to adapt and be driven by what we see around us and essentially become, in certain ways, these things that we see around us, extending beyond our means? Why is this? And I'm going to submit to you that deep within us, deep within every individual, there's a human tendency to seek approval and affirmation. Basically, we all want to be validated, okay? There's an internal inclination to want validation. Now, our sources of validation could be from a variety of different places, right? Family members, a spouse, a friend, a colleague, professional associates, a social circle, a church environment, right? It could come from various places. But subconsciously, there is a desire inherent in the human person to please and to impress, because there are rewards attached to that, right? And we are attracted to the rewards. Okay, let's use money as an example. All right, if we use money or status, right? And things that connote a certain image. We were just talking about image a second ago. Okay, and we see that money and relationships, for instance, they go hand in hand. So the more access you have to money and the status, right? And the more you can enhance your image through expensive things, for example, is the more likely you are to be aligned with what we perceive to be better relationships. So historically, right, class systems, this is how class systems came about. The more you have, the more that you are endowed with, the more affluent you are, is the more likely you are to have these, better connections. It's the more likely you are to have these more desirable relationships, so to speak, with the who's who within that particular setting, within that particular society or environment. A well-known financial advisor, whose name I will not call, those of you that have been around me for any period of time, you know exactly who I'm talking about. But this is somebody that I've been following for several years now. He often talks about the danger of spending money you don't have to buy things you don't need, to impress people who don't really care in ways that don't matter. So I'll repeat it. It's the danger. He talks about the risks associated with spending money that you don't have to buy things that you don't need, basically to impress people that you have no connection to, right? Who don't like you or who you don't like them. There's no connection to, about things that really don't matter. You're trying to impress somebody. And so the question that comes to mind is, why is this? Why are we stressing to impress? Okay, why? And so I'd like to share, from my perspective, that one of the issues is that we're instinctively wired to not want to be left out or to not sort of be left behind, okay? And when I talk about that, I'm thinking in terms of trends, right? Trends change, fashion changes, styles change, technology changes, right? And there's an instinctive inclination to not want to be the one who's left out in the cold, who's left behind, who's straggling, who's not keeping up. So this can draw you into a lifestyle of flossing, balling, shot calling, but more important, or more often rather than that, is unfortunately when you're drawn into this lifestyle, you get drawn into what's called jonesing, okay? Another sort of urban term, if I can say that, okay? Jonesing. If you've never heard about it, I'm sure you've heard about it in this way. If you've never heard that word, rather, I'm sure you've heard about it in this way. Keeping up with the Joneses. Okay, we're gonna pick on the Jones family for tonight. The Joneses have been through so much. It's all right, Joneses. We sympathize with you. But keeping up with the Joneses. Keeping up with the Joneses. No doubt you've likely heard that expression before. And basically, it's just trying to demonstrate that you are just as good as someone else by getting what they have, doing what they do, going where they go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's keeping up with the Joneses, with somebody else. On the flip side, okay, other times it's all about wanting to live up to the expectations that other people have projected on you, okay? And falling into the trap that just because you're a certain profession or you have a certain family connection or you grew up in a certain neighborhood, or you somehow you have to live up to this ideal that people believe to be your reality, when in fact it couldn't be any further from the truth. But it's something that they've projected onto you based on what they perceive or based on what they see, based on assumptions that they've made, based on conclusions that they've drawn, and you now have become sucked into this. Let me hit the pause button one more time on that one and just go back for a second to the point about keeping up with the Joneses. It can't shake me. There's another expression, a common expression that we've heard, which is, the grass always seems greener on the other side of the fence. Now we'll frame it in terms of the Joneses' grass. Okay, their lawn, the grass always seems greener in the Joneses' backyard on their lawn. But what comes to mind, though we may perceive the grass to be green, we have no idea the stench that they had to put up with in order for their grass to look that green. And what I'm referring to in that respect is the fertilization process, so to speak, that they had to employ. We have no idea what their water bill looks like in order to make their grass look that green. Okay, and so this ties into this notion of jonesing, of trying to keep up with the Joneses, and the danger that can be attached to that. In either the two scenarios that we just described, so whether it's trying to keep up with the Joneses or whether it's getting sucked into this projected image that somebody puts on you and you feel that you have to keep up with that, right? Either way, you end up stretching and living beyond your means rather than living within or even below your means. Okay, that's the result of that kind of behavior. And so there it is, we end up being stressed to impress. But let's ask ourselves the question as we continue, like at what expense, at what cost are we actually putting ourselves through this, okay? So many times we can subconsciously, or even consciously for that matter, walk right into a stress trap. And that's what I'm calling it. It's a trap. It's a stress trap simply by trying to keep up. Stress in all its forms is disruptive to every system in your body. Let me repeat that. Stress is a disruption to every system in your body, nervous system, respiratory system, name all the systems, okay? Stress is a disruptor of that. But among other things, it can lead to heart attack or even stroke. So there's physiological impacts that can manifest in your body when you're stressed. And take that even further, it can even affect the brain, which creates greater susceptibility to mental health issues. So not only can there be physiological, but there can also be mental health problems, such as things like anxiety or depression, when we enter into this mode of being stressed. Now, this kind of lifestyle, the lifestyles that I've been describing, keeping up with the Joneses and all these things, it will stress you to the core, and it can suck the energy out of you if it's something that you continue to maintain and fall into time and time again, right? That stress that comes with wanting to impress will inevitably lead to failure. Keep it up for a lifetime, and ultimately you will see it will lead you down the wrong path. I'll go so far as to say that stressing oneself out in a manner, whether it's to keep up appearances, as I said, or to be constantly driven by an internal pressure, right? That the first point that I mentioned, it's actually a manifestation of your own insecurity. We don't have time to unpack that. This is Tuesday's thought, not Tuesday's thesis. So we'll get back to that another time. But anyway, sit on that. Let that simmer for a little bit. Think about the fact that it is a manifestation of the insecurities that you're struggling with for yourself, because oftentimes we do not frame it in that way. And that's the unfortunate thing. The end game of being stressed out to impress, it will ultimately lead you to becoming ineffective and ultimately irrelevant. Well, now that we've laid out the problem, the question that comes to your mind is, what can we do about it? What do we do about this, okay? First and foremost, stop. Just stop. Just stop. Okay? Stop, get it together, let's work on this. You just have to stop. You have to recognize that it's an issue, it's a problem. If you constantly find yourself in this rat trap, okay, today is your day, you can be free. It's time to stop. It's time to stop. Put it in the comment. Just stop, okay? That's the first thing. The second thing you'll want to do is just begin to recognize your priorities. Spend more time recognizing your priorities, okay? Your priority should not be people-pleasing. Come on, we're adults. We're adults. And even to the young folk out there, listen, take notes, okay? Because this stuff starts early, okay? A priority of your life should not be people-pleasing. So you should recognize it, and I acknowledge it takes some time and it takes some maturity for you to get here. And even the second point, which is recognizing you're not, the first point is recognizing that you're not here to please people. My second point would really be kind of be real with yourself. Nobody cares, okay? Here you are struggling and striving and you know, stressing yourself out to get the latest this or to get the latest that. Nobody really cares. At the end of the day, it seems like a harsh statement. You know, you may catch folks' attention, sure, but your ability to change your outfit 3 times per day, 365 days of the year, and there's nothing wrong with having an extensive wardrobe, let me put that out there, but that really is not going to impact anyone's life, okay? In the broad scheme of things, in the grand scheme of things, it's not having an impact. So just be mindful of recognizing priorities. The next thing, the last point, is to find contentment in your own life. And as I said, this requires some deep digging. It requires some, you know, you having to go through some experiences and, you know, really mature as you develop sort of in yourself. But on this point is where I want to kind of anchor the text, and we're going to look to some wisdom from the Apostle Paul in getting to a place where you can find contentment. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 and 7. It says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain." Verse 7 says, "For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it." And I'll even go on to tack in verse 8. It says in the New Living Translation, it says, so if we have food and clothing, let us be content. I love how the writer put in clothing, Kidding. I'm sorry, saints, pray. Just pray for me right where you are. Put the hand emoji in the comments and that's the laying on of hands. I'm kidding. It's referring to the necessaries of life, food, clothing, shelter, right? We can find contentment in having the things that we need. And we have the assurance. St. Matthew, we read for ourselves that our Heavenly Father makes provision for the lilies of the field, the sparrows, the birds in the air. How much more us, we his children. And so if you have your basic necessities, you can find your way to finding contentment with it. Now, don't get me wrong, you can have your goals, right? Let's just say financial for an example. But work, and it's okay to have financial goals. It's okay to like nice things, right? But work a plan, okay? Work on a plan without stressing yourself so you can actually achieve those things that may be important to you or the nice things that you might like to have every now and again, all right? Don't be trying to stress yourself out before time. And again, the context being doing it for the sake of keeping up with someone else or to impress someone else, okay? We have to, time's up on that. We have to, leave that in the past. We have to let that go. We have to lay that burden down and we have to move forward. I'm going to just close with this thought. And I'd like you all for a moment to just consider this question. It says, if the whole world was blind, how many people would you impress? Now, this is obviously a very powerful rhetorical question, right? And it really connotes that the weightier matters of life, so the things that matter the most as it pertains to leaving an impression, are those things about us that are intangible. Character, the spirit of a person, right? The proverbial fruit that your life manifests. It's by those things that we should hope to impress on the lives of others, so that if we were living in a world where everyone was blind, our efforts to impress would be based solely on our actions, guided by the content of our character. So just let that thought take the stress out of it as you strive to reflect the character of Christ in all that you do. Don't be out here stressing to try to impress, but let your character, let the things that nobody sees in secret, let those things bring glory to God. Let those things be what drive you and what motivate you. And ultimately, your good Heavenly Father will endow you. He'll make sure you have the things that you need, and often, even some of the things that we want. So I pray that this has been a blessing for you. And as always, my prayer tonight is that the peace of God will be with you. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. God bless you.